The rain came down in sheets, soaking the pavement until the street shimmered like liquid glass. Ethan Cole stood beneath a flickering streetlight, a suitcase at his feet, his breath clouding in the cold air. The digital clock on his phone read 2:47 a.m. somewhere behind him. A door had slammed, and with it, the last illusion of safety that he didn't know how long he'd been standing there. His shirt clung to his skin, heavy with rain, and every drop that hit his face felt like a reminder, of words shouted, of truths uncovered, of love that had quietly rotted from the inside. Hours earlier, the house had been silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Maya had been in bed, turned away from him, pretending to sleep. Ethan had sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone screen, scrolling through old messages he should have deleted. Messages from Daniel, the man whose voice had become a place he escaped to. It had started harmlessly, or so he told himself. Just late-night conversations with someone who listened, who asked how he was and cared about the answer. Daniel's warmth had slipped through the cracks in his life like sunlight through blinds. Ethan hadn't meant to fall into it, but loneliness made strange choices for people. He hadn't noticed Maya in the doorway until it was too late. "Who's Daniel?" she had asked, her voice calm but brittle, as though it might break if he lied. Ethan had looked up, startled, heart hammering in his chest. "He's just a friend." "Friends don't send messages like that," she'd said, tossing his phone onto the table. The screen glowed with words that burned. "You make me feel seen, even when I'm lost." That he tried to explain, fumbling for language that didn't exist, how he hadn't touched Daniel, hadn't crossed that line, how it wasn't what it looked like. But Maya's face had hardened into something unrecognizable. "You've been gone for months, Ethan," she'd said quietly. "I just didn't realize until now that you weren't coming back." Then came the shouting. Words like knives, sharp and final. Accusations, denials, tears that didn't matter anymore. He saw in her eyes that the argument wasn't about Daniel, not really. It was about every dinner eaten in silence, every night she'd reached for him and found distance instead of warmth. When she finally said, "Get out," it wasn't rage, it was resignation. The sound of a door closing after too many years of trying to keep it open. Now, standing in the rain, Ethan understood the meaning of silence. It wasn't peace. It was absence, of love, of forgiveness, of home. He adjusted his grip on the suitcase handle and started walking. The city was a ghost at this hour. Streetlights hummed, rainwater hissed through gutters, and the world seemed to breathe in slow, measured sighs. Ethan's sneakers slapped against the pavement, each step echoing like a heartbeat too loud in the quiet. That he thought of calling someone, anyone, but his phone battery blinked red. Maybe that was for the best. There was no one to call. A car passed, headlights slicing through the dark. Then another. Neither stopped. He wondered if he looked like what he felt, lost, desperate, unmoored. He reached an intersection and paused beneath a traffic light that blinked from red to green, then back again, though no cars were there to see it. The wind smelled of wet asphalt and loneliness. He could almost hear Maya's voice, low and trembling. "Was any of it real, Ethan?" He didn't have an answer. A distant rumble of tires broke the rhythm of the rain. A black sedan slowed as it neared him, headlights dimming. For a moment, he thought it might be someone he knew, but no one he knew would be driving toward him at this hour. The car stopped. The window rolled down halfway. A voice came from inside, steady and warm despite the storm. "You look like you could use a ride." Ethan hesitated. Rain pooled at his feet. The stranger's face was barely visible, lit only by the dashboard glow. He swallowed. "I'm fine," he managed, though his voice betrayed him. The man tilted his head, unconvinced. "You're standing in the middle of the street with a suitcase. That doesn't look fine." Something in his tone, not pity, but quiet concern, disarmed Ethan. He looked at the car, at the open door, at the promise of warmth he didn't deserve. After a long pause, he stepped forward and opened the door. The heat inside hit him immediately, wrapping around his frozen hands. He sat down, shutting the door softly behind him. The sound of rain faded, replaced by the gentle hum of the engine. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, eyes calm and unreadable. "Rough night?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "All right," the man said, turning the wheel. Let's get you somewhere dry. As the car pulled away, Ethan stared out the window, the rain-slick street stretching endlessly ahead. For the first time that night, he wasn't walking alone. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them. Ethan sat in the passenger seat now, his wet clothes clinging to his skin, the heater whispering warmth against the cold night. The driver's hands were steady on the wheel, knuckles pale in the dim light. His voice had been calm, measured, the kind that carried comfort without effort. "I'm Daniel," he said at last, breaking the quiet. "You don't have to talk, but it usually helps." Ethan's gaze stayed on the windshield, where raindrops streaked like veins of silver. He felt raw, not from the storm, but from everything that had led him here. "Ethan," he murmured. "Thanks for stopping." Daniel nodded slightly, eyes still on the road. "Didn't look like you had anywhere else to go." The city slipped past them, a collage of shuttered storefronts and flickering signs. The streets glowed under the rain, each reflection doubling the emptiness. Ethan's suitcase rested by his feet, a single piece of evidence that his life had been uprooted in one night. After a few minutes, Daniel asked, "Where to?" Ethan hesitated. "Just drive." Daniel didn't press. The tires hissed over wet asphalt, carrying them through the sleeping city. Every few blocks, streetlights painted their faces gold before fading back into shadow. Ethan's thoughts drifted, unwillingly, to the house he'd left behind, to Maya, probably sitting on the edge of their bed, pretending not to cry. The guilt came like a pulse, steady and familiar. "I'm sorry if I'm intruding," Daniel said after a while, "but you look like someone who's been carrying too much for too long." Ethan let out a hollow laugh. "That obvious?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I drive people for a living. You start to notice the ones who are running from something." Ethan turned to look at him for the first time. Daniel's profile was gentle, illuminated by the soft light of the dashboard, dark eyes, quiet strength in his posture, a weariness that mirrored Ethan's own. "I'm not running," Ethan said, though the words tasted like a lie. "I got thrown out." Daniel's tone softened. "That's still running, just in reverse." The response drew an unexpected smile from Ethan, small, but real. For the first time that night, he felt seen. They drove until the rain eased to a drizzle. When Daniel pulled into a roadside diner, the neon sign buzzed faintly, casting pink and blue across the windshield. "Coffee?" Daniel asked. "You look like you could use something warm." Ethan hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, coffee sounds good." Inside, the diner was nearly empty. The smell of old coffee and fried food hung in the air, comforting in its ordinariness. They sat across from each other in a booth by the window, both too aware of the quiet between them. Daniel stirred his cup absently. "So," he said, "want to tell me what happened?" Ethan stared at the steam rising from his drink, watching it twist and vanish. "My wife found out about someone. It wasn't physical, not yet. But I guess that doesn't matter." Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. He simply listened. "She said I'd already left her long before tonight," Ethan continued. "And maybe she's right. I kept trying to be the person she needed, but I don't think I ever was." Daniel leaned back, his voice low. "That kind of loneliness, it eats at you. Sometimes we look for light in places we're not supposed to." Ethan's eyes lifted. "And sometimes we find it." Their gazes met, steady, searching, a quiet understanding passing between them. The hum of the diner's refrigerator filled the space where words would have failed. Ethan wanted to say something else, to ask Daniel why he seemed to understand too well, but the question dissolved before it reached his tongue. Instead, Daniel stood and dropped a few bills on the counter. "Come on," he said gently. "You shouldn't be out all night." Back in the car, the world felt smaller, more intimate. The air was warmer now, the silence no longer heavy but charged. Ethan watched the streetlights blur past as Daniel drove, the rhythm of the wipers marking time between thoughts neither dared to speak. "Do you ever feel," Ethan said quietly, "like you're pretending your whole life?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward him. "Every day, once. Until I stopped." Ethan studied his reflection in the window, pale, tired, unfamiliar. How'd you stop? I told the truth, Daniel said simply. Even when it cost me. Ethan swallowed. That sounds hard. It was, Daniel replied. But living a lie was harder. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with trees, their wet leaves glistening under the headlights. Daniel's voice softened. You have somewhere to stay? Ethan shook his head. No, Daniel glanced at him, then back at the road. Then stay with me tonight. I've got a spare room. No strings attached. Ethan hesitated. You don't even know me. Daniel smiled faintly. I don't need to. Sometimes strangers understand more than anyone else. The offer lingered between them, fragile but sincere. Ethan felt something shift inside him, not trust, not yet, but a quiet surrender to the moment that he nodded. All right. Daniel turned down another street, headlights cutting through the mist. Outside, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, forgiving. Inside the car, neither man spoke. The road ahead seemed endless, and yet, for the first time that night, Ethan didn't dread where it might lead. Daniel's apartment was small but warm, the kind of place that carried quiet stories in its corners. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked wood. Ethan stepped inside hesitantly, clutching his suitcase as if it were the last piece of himself that hadn't been dismantled. Make yourself comfortable, Daniel said, hanging his jacket by the door. There's a towel in the bathroom. You can change into something dry. Ethan nodded, grateful but unsure. He moved through the space like a guest in someone's life, every object felt intentional, every silence gentle. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with paperbacks and old travel mugs. A framed photograph sat on the shelf, Daniel with another man, both laughing, sunlight caught between them. Ethan looked away before Daniel noticed. When he emerged from the bathroom wearing one of Daniel's t-shirts, the air between them had shifted. The storm had stopped, but its echo lingered in the quiet hum of the radiator. Feeling better? Daniel asked. Warmer, Ethan replied, offering a faint smile. Daniel poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. They sat across from each other on opposite sides of the couch, the dim lamp painting soft halos around them. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. She didn't deserve that. The lies, the distance. Daniel didn't respond right away. He took a sip of coffee, studying Ethan with the kind of attention that made words unnecessary. People deserve the truth, he said finally, but sometimes we're not ready to give it, even to ourselves. Ethan stared into his cup, watching the ripples settle. I thought marriage would fix me. That if I tried hard enough, the rest would fade. Did it? Daniel asked gently. Ethan shook his head. No. It just made me better at pretending. Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable but kind. I did the same once, he admitted. Pretended to be what everyone expected, until it nearly broke me. Ethan looked up. What changed? Daniel smiled faintly. I realized I wasn't living. I was performing. The confession hung between them, tender and raw. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the need to hide behind explanations. The walls he built, around his marriage, his desires, his guilt, began to crack. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. All I know is that I'm tired of being afraid. Daniel's voice softened. Then maybe tonight, you stop being afraid. Just for a little while. Ethan met his gaze, steady, open, unguarded. The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with something unsaid but deeply understood. A pulse of longing passed between them, fragile yet undeniable. Daniel reached out, brushing his fingers against Ethan's hand. The touch was tentative, like asking a question. Ethan didn't pull away. The silence that followed felt like an answer neither of them needed to speak. Ethan moved closer, drawn by something beyond reason, not lust, but recognition. When their lips met, the world quieted. The kiss was gentle, uncertain, an exhale of all the words they couldn't say aloud. For one breathless moment, guilt and grief melted into something pure, honesty, then Ethan pulled back, trembling. "I can't," he said softly, the ache in his voice sharp as glass. "Not like this." Daniel nodded, his hand still resting near Ethan's. "You don't have to. Just know you're allowed to feel again." The words lingered, more comforting than any apology could be. Ethan looked away, tears burning behind his eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. As dawn began to bleed through the blinds, the first light touched Daniel's face, soft and forgiving. Ethan stood, setting his cup on the table. "I should go," he murmured. Daniel didn't stop him. "You'll find what you're looking for, Ethan," he said quietly. "Even if it takes time." Ethan managed a nod, the weight in his chest lighter than when he'd arrived. He found a notepad on the counter and scribbled a few words before slipping out the door. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky painted in pale gold. The street was empty except for the distant sound of traffic waking up. Ethan walked slowly, suitcase in hand, until he reached a bus stop. He sat down, watching the horizon brighten. The note he'd left on Daniel's counter contained only 7 words: "Thank you for seeing me." For real. He didn't know where he was headed, or what came next, only that he no longer felt like a ghost in his own life. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. As he stepped aboard, Ethan glanced once more at the street behind him, where the storm had ended and the morning had begun. Voiceover, final narration. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. Sometimes it's the truth breaking free, even if it leaves you standing in the rain. The bus doors closed, and the city moved past in streaks of light. Ethan rested his forehead against the glass, eyes half closed, breathing evenly. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace.